All right. I'd like to call this meeting of the North Kansas City Planning Commission to order. The first item of business is to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Our next order of business is to approve the minutes from the meeting of April 6th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now I would ask that anyone who has public comments not related to items that we will have public comments on later, including, and we are going to have comments later related to STRs. So anyone who has comments not related to that, please come to the microphone. Okay, I see none. The next one is PC 2023-05-01, zoning text amendment for short-term rentals. Staff, do you have a report?
Yes. Planning Commissioners, good evening. This item in front of you is a continued case from an April Planning Commission meeting. This is a code amendment regarding to lodging short-term rental in zoning code title 17. As staff has been directed by the commissioners from last meeting, staff has made some changes to the proposed language. Such change has been highlighted in the staff report under the second meeting, May 4th, 2024. So the proposed change is under Section B, lodging short-term rental. Number 2, the owner of the proposed change is the owner of the rental unit shall reside within 50 miles of the city limits and must demonstrate a sufficient ability for site maintenance and property management. So as opposed to what was proposed before as the applicant of the property shall must demonstrate a sufficient ability as well as being an owner-occupied residential unit to be able to have a short-term rental running under the property. So this particular change is defined as the owner does not have to live within where the short-term rental is running for that particular property, but the owner shall reside within 50 miles of the city property of the city limit. So this is the change I believe I have received from the commissioners as comparing to what was proposed before. However, I did receive some comments on clarification of the owner over here. Say, what if the ownership is under an LLC or a corporation or a potential trustee? Will that be defined as the owner? In this case, it could be defined as owner. However, for LLCs or corporation, they would not be able to have the ability to reside within 50 miles of the city limits. So the language here proposed will exclude trustee or LLCs in this particular matter. If you wish to move forward with this language, I want to clarify this is what this language stands for. However, currently we don't have the definition of owner in this Title 17, our zoning code. We do have a definition of owner under Title 15, which is the property maintenance code. The definition for the owner is spelled as the following. I'll have to read it. So the owner means any person or legal entity with a legal or equitable ownership interest in the structure. So that's the definition. We could define the owner under this particular section if you wish to add the definition, or if the goal is to allow the trustee or any corporation or LLC to run a short-term rental as far as they have a dedicated local agent to live within 50 miles of the city limit, I would recommend you to change the language, as you're seeing on the staff report, to the following. The owner or a local agent or representative authorized by the owner to handle the affairs of the property shall reside within 50 miles of the city limits. So you can consider such language to clarify the need. And the second component I would like to add is just for clarification that last time we have discussed about whether or not the entirety of the property can be rented out as SDR? The answer is yes. I know there's a little bit confusion for that under B1, the approved space for short-term rentals may include, so we could consider adding a C under here, a subsection, that the entirety of the property. So this way, it's clear that the entirety of the property can be rented out as short-term rental. And another clarification over here is under item number 4, that no food service may be provided by the resident. I remember last time the commissioners has raised a question about what a packed food. So we clarified that no prepared food shall be offered at the site. So just for clarification, that you can change the language to no prepared food service may be provided by the resident. I'm here to answer any other questions if you wish to move forward with this discussion.
Is this when we could make comments, or do we want to do the
You can make
public-
comments.
Okay. I'd like to kick this off a little bit. No, we'll do public comments after, correct? There's been a lot of research done on STRs in communities in the last few years, and a lot of recent studies have found that communities with less tourist-driven economies like ours experience population displacement and an increase of quality of life complaints from residents where STRs were permitted in their communities without adequate regulation. The City Council of Kansas City met today to discuss more restrictive STR rules after multiple complaints from neighborhood residents of noise, disruptions, the erosion of community caused by too many STRs, and the impact of STRs on affordable housing in areas popular to STR locations. The Kansas City Council passed the following. Non-resident STRs are no longer allowed in residentially zoned properties. Previously approved non-resident STRs are allowed to continue in residentially zoned districts. No new ones will be permitted. The last time we met, we discussed removing the owner-occupied requirement from our ordinance. I have since given this more thought in terms of our neighborhood zoning. Community zoning regulations exist for a reason. Short-term rentals that are not owner-occupied are businesses that, in my opinion, do not belong in residential neighborhood zones. I read a quote this afternoon that seems very fitting to this discussion. A nuisance may merely be the right thing in the wrong place, like a pig in a parlor instead of a barnyard. STRs without on-site management represent commercial activities that are incompatible with residential neighborhoods. They are hotels without a front desk. Like a pig in a parlor, they are the right thing in the wrong place. I would like to recommend we consider 2 types of STRs in terms of our city zoning areas, those in residential areas and those in non-residential areas. Type 1 would be owner-occupied residential units that would be permitted in residentially zoned areas. The people who operate these are running home businesses and are invested in the community in a substantial way. They must live on site a majority of the year and be able to physically address issues when renters are present. Type 2 would be non-owner occupied units that would be permitted in not residentially zoned areas. This type would not require owners to live on site, but the owner needs to reside within 50 miles of the property. Alternatively, as in Kansas City, we could allow an unlimited number of owner-occupied STRs in any zone, but issue a very restrictive cap on non-owner occupied STRs in our residential zones. I would also like to recommend a few other policies around STRs in our community. 1, I would require that STR operators register with the city and pay a registration fee that we could determine. The city would then provide registered STRs a registration number that must be posted on the STR listing online. Sites like Airbnb provide for this. Significant escalating fines for STR operators that list properties online without registration. Those fines could be determined. And denial of registration for 1 year for STR properties that are listed without registration more than once in a 12-month period. I also recommend that we create a process to revoke registration for STRs that are disruptive to their neighbors. This could be based on a number of substantiated complaints, police calls, etc., in a 12-month period. Thanks. Are there any other comments about STRs or any other discussion?
I was going to ask, I've tried to read the proposal. What and this kind of gets to your point on the fines, what happens in today's world? We have several that are operating illegally. There's no fines levied against them currently. There's no proposal. If someone didn't register and continued to operate the Airbnb as this is drafted, what is the fine structure?
So there's not a fine. We will say if we pass the ordinance, we legalize STR, and we found these people when we start to enforce this code, and we find there are people running it without registration or proper registration or approval, then what we're bringing in is code enforcement. It's essentially the same component when we do our property maintenance, then we will bring the code compliance component. I will have my staff investigate it, and we will open a case when we find, okay, they're in violation of the code, and the code is what you're doing right now, that they are not properly registered, and then we can ask them to correct their actions by either registering for it, or if they're not eligible for register for whatever reason, if this code doesn't approve it, then we will ask them to shut it down. If they refuse, there's a citation to the court. So that's the component for code compliance part. And of course, there could be fines related to it.
It's interesting just that Casey Mo has gone a different path with that. It seems like they're going directly to a fine structure rather than that longer, very cumbersome path, it seems like. So that's just worth considering. I was surprised that it would take that much action, city time, to go down that road, just to get people to follow the rules. That's what I was concerned about.
We could establish a fine system here in this code if that's what the planning commissioners wish to do. That say if there is evidence being determined by likely the director of community development department that there is strong evidence showing there is violation to the code, the city shall fine X amount of dollars. We could propose that as well. And just a reminder, currently there's no registration fee being proposed to this, so registration is free. However, there is a business license component. That part is not free.
How much is the business license component?
I don't have that on top of my head. I don't think it's maybe they start like 35, but it depends, I guess, on the business license.
35
side.
a year?
Per business license. You don't, yeah.
Thanks, Megan.
I don't have that
Pesos.
number exactly over here.
Yeah, so where I'm going with that is, and I think we talked about this a little last time, Shu, is that it's going to take cities time to regulate these, to follow up. It's going to take resources. It's going to take X hours of a person making a certain salary just to go get these in check. I think we need to find, not fees, but memberships or something that registration fees that have to be paid annually to offset that cost so that the city, so I think that needs to be built in. I think we need to set how much it's going to cost, what the fees are going to be. So if someone's considering starting an Airbnb here, they know potentially what they're up against, right?
Right.
Or what they need to financially think about, first of all. Just something to consider.
Yeah,
I don't know what the number is, but that's just something worth considering.
It is a common practice to charge a registration fee to cover the staff's time in general.
Do we have a proposal for what that would
We
be?
don't have a proposal for that yet, but if you guys want to, if commissioners, you want to discuss about the amount, I would be very happy to hear that.
I just wanted to, excuse me, comment on the owner piece. I mean, can we define owner maybe as the natural person owner? Because my observation would be I really don't care how they want to be taxed, what is basically an LLC or a sole proprietorship or a partnership. Those are basically just taxing authorities and how they split up their profits. And I don't care about that so much as I want the natural person owner to be within 50 miles of North Kansas City. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I mean, so that would be my observation on owner. I would just assume define that as the natural person And that way they can come under, they can, you know what I'm saying, they can come as any type of entity, that really doesn't matter.
So, if I hear you correctly, Commissioner, that you're saying, you're talking about number 2, right? Where we're,
Yeah, where you were
cor-
initially talking about the owner.
the owner occupancy requirement. So I want to clarify this, that this is my professional opinion, that the owner occupied requirement is not to focusing on the accountability for property management. The essential intention behind it to have owner occupied property for STR to limit that is to largely limit the number of STR that's capable in this community. However, if the intention is to hold somebody accountable, particularly for property management, then I would suggest you to change the language to the owner or a local agent or representative of the owner. In this case, it's clear, it could be the owner, it could be anybody designated by the owner to hold them accountable for property management, if that is the intention from commissioners. I just want to clarify that component.
Well, I can only go by my experience at Northgate Village, and we have an agent that's supposed to like manage the place. They're difficult to get a hold of. They're close by. I mean, they're right at the airport. They're very difficult to get a hold of. So
Right.
so to me, an agent that doesn't get us there. There needs to be an actual person with a physical address. If it's an LLC, there has to be a person behind it that lives within 50 miles of North Kansas City because of what you just said. Because the further away they are, the less complaints actually mean.
We
I mean, it
can.
means nothing the further
Right.
away.
We can amend this language to a similar language that's used for long-term rental properties. In that particular section, we actually ask for information of the full name, address, telephone number, and email address of a local agent or representative authorized by the owner to handle the affairs of property. And so we could add language particularly for this requirement. So this way, we have the record of this particular person, a real-life person, and with their contact information, if that's what you wish to move forward.
Go ahead.
So to add on to what John was saying, it's kind of a tricky needle to thread because if you say agent, you're leaving it out where a management company could be in charge of it. And, you know, even in the long-term rental space, management companies can be difficult to deal with, hard to reach, and like lack any sort of decorum or caring about the property or the community. I think the idea of having someone within 50 miles, like the true owner within 50 miles is like this person is boots on the ground. Like this is the person who owns the property. But then we come into nobody in their right mind should hold an Airbnb in their personal name. They should hold it in an LLC or a trust more often than not. So then we get into, okay, so somebody has formed an LLC, registered in, pick a state, Delaware. And now we're trying to track down who the beneficial owner of the LLC is so that they're within 50 miles. Is there a way that that can be worded where the actual person behind the LLC is the one that lives within 50 miles? But I don't have the language for that.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the Kansas City ordinance today, I mean, I think they kind of define it based on several different things. Like for a corporation, they want a corporate officer or chief operating officer. Partnership, the managing partner. Limited liability company, the managing or administrative member. Limited partnership, they want the general partner. For a trust, a trustee. Or a real estate investment trust, a general partner or an officer. I mean, so something like that
Yeah.
kind of puts it on whoever
They're an owner.
they're registered. Yeah, they should. Well, but of course, we see how these things get structured often.
Right.
It has to be
But it points to another person,
physical
not
address.
another company that owns the. I
Right.
don't know.
That
But something
makes
to look
sense.
at for definitions. I just wanted to throw that piece
Yeah.
on there.
Maybe just co-opt the language.
And then I have others. I'll go on a couple others here.
Go ahead.
Permitting. As we talk about cost, you kind of have permitting, which seems a little bit more fixed in time. Probably, I know there's always some variations, but you know, to your point on cost, there is permitting, which we can probably get to a quantifiable number. The tougher one is code enforcement because you're going to be constantly going out, and that's more responsive to the sort of issues you're having. So I'm not sure, if we just focus on what that permit fee is for now, and to say, here's your permit fee and here's what permitting time cost. Here's what staff time to permit.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a number. It looked like Casey Mo went with 100 a year, 200 a year. I think that might actually help cut down on the number a little bit, because say somebody was only going to rent out a night or two a year. Well, that's something that the city's going to have to go do, and we're going to have to do a whole bunch just to go get them 1 or 2 nights. If there was a decent fee, 200 a year to that, they might think twice before they did that, and we have a whole bunch of regular ones and then these little ones that pop up here and there. We don't really see them very often. So that, again, might achieve our goal of helping control some of the overall number. Also giving the city, that's probably not a lot of money on how many Airbnbs we have, but it's a start. And if it's not enough, we talked about coming back in a year, and we're talking about a lot of staff time and how much money's been spent, then we raise it the following year.
Well, now we're going to skip topics. Do we have a number? Anyone else? Is there
So
another?
Kansas City has proposed a flat fee for registration of $200.
There we go.
But that's per year.
That's per year, yes.
I
It's
would
an
say
annual fee.
I would say that would make sense.
we at least
for-
again, I don't want to be too far behind Kansas City where somebody says it's better to have an Airbnb here than there, and we get to flood this direction.
There we go. 200. All right, now,
So are we all nodding heads on 200?
Yes.
Okay.
okay, and then in general, I'd agree with what Lindsay said earlier. I think it would make sense to split it kind of into 2 categories, as she noted. I wouldn't prohibit in all R zones, though. I would certainly consider restrictions in R1A and R1B, probably. But to the point of, and I'm spacing on his name that presented last time, that owns the fourplex. I mean, to me, those are prime for that sort of thing, a short-term rental. So while I would support against splitting them into categories, I wouldn't restrict all R zones.
I think that going with R1A, R1B, and then I'd like to include the Northgate Village area as
They-
well. And I know it's a PUD or plan district. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's possible for us to do that, or to implement something that says that the city will honor our current HOA
Yeah.
restrictions, which say that we aren't allowed to run Airbnbs in that area, then you wouldn't issue any permits for that area.
So you're right. I want to make sure everybody is aware for our current Northgate Village, according to the restriction of the deed of the land itself, we do not allow short-term rental over there just by that covenants itself. So we could propose a language over there. I would recommend, because Northgate itself is a PUD, it stands for Planned Unit District. It is a zoning district itself. So if we want to just endorse that, we can say, zoned Northgate PUD or R1A or R1B. So just to classify it by the zoning code itself, would it just take Northgate out of it?
And then if we were to restrict those, would we want to restrict them, and if we restricted short-term rentals in R1A and R1B, would we want to restrict those entirely to where we wouldn't allow any, or would we want to restrict those to only owner-operated or owner-occupied?
Sorry, I fell short there. Generally, I'd follow not far from what Kansas City generally did there, and that residential short-term units would still be allowed. I believe in all zones where residential dwellings are currently allowed, which is R1A, R1B, R2, R3, R4, R5, CIO, C1, C2, C3, I think.
They've restricted, so they have an unlimited number of short-term rentals that are owner-occupied, but non-owner occupied are restricted to 1 every 1,000 feet,
Non-owner occupied.
which is about 1 every quarter mile, which would severely limit those in our,
On non-owner restricted, is what you're saying?
non-owner occupied. are
Non-owner
restricted to
occupied
1 every
are-
1,000 feet.
That might be tough here. I mean, I'm fine
We can
with
put in a
restrictions.
cap
The
for
1,000 feet
non-owner
maybe, because especially if you look at, I'll go back to the, I can't even remember if it's a fourplex. I'm going to keep saying it anyways. The fourplex scenario, that would only allow one of those to be, if I'm hearing that correctly, only one of those allowed to be short-term rentals,
So we could-
which is fine if that's what people support.
we
But
could restrict it
that's
to non-owner occupied, like a cap for non-owner occupied.
just an overall total cap.
Yeah, and then an unlimited number of owner occupied, which would allow for the ones that currently have invested and purchased properties here and are running them without any issue to continue operating them, and once they get them registered, and then provide a small amount of additional ones that could then come into play. But we would then assess that cap every year to make sure that it's working. Either we limit it more or we allow more.
And I'll just add on top of that, I mean, something I would support finding some sort of path to existing registered, not that they're registered short term, but we do have a rental registration, so you should still be rendered you should have still been registered under the rental registration, and probably actually have a business license since you're running a business as well. Those ones, if we could find a path to allow them to continue to exist, if we were to apply restrictions, that I would support as well. I'll add one more policy and then go on. I still want to add something to restrict. I'll just read the language I wrote down here. Short-term rentals shall not operate in structures or in a parcel that receives any city incentive, including tax abatements, sales tax exemptions, tax credits, or any forms of financial assistance, unless specifically authorized by city council. And I'm actually going to strike one of my own things, which is sales tax exemption, because that's a one-off. There we go, on the fly. That's what happens when you do stuff really fast here. Let me read that one more time. What I'd like to propose is short-term rentals shall not operate in structures or on a parcel that receives any city incentive, including tax abatements, tax credits, or other forms of financial assistance, unless specifically authorized by the city council. You know, in general, I think allowing short-term rentals on city incentivized projects seems counterproductive to one of the city's goals, which I am always told and believe to be the city would like to see us maintain our current affordable housing stock as well as create new affordable housing options. And then incentivizing a project and then taking units out of stock just seems counterproductive to me. So I would like to see that in here as well somewhere.
I would agree with that.
If I hear you correctly, you added a couple things here, that you're talking about limiting owner occupied only for R1A and R1B per zoning district and Northgate PUD. And then you're also talking, just trying to repeat it, make sure I understand it. And then you're also talking about if the property, regardless of the zoning, if it is currently registered as a rental property with the city and pass inspections and comply with city's code, then they're exempt from this requirement of the owner occupancy for running short-term rental. Am I understanding that correctly?
That isn't generally, yeah, that's generally what I said.
Okay,
That sounds, I'm trying to process it at the same time here.
so
It
basically,
sounds like you hit most of my points there. Yeah, if they're already registered, already passing inspections, doing the general rental things, whether you're doing short-term or long-term, that you should probably be doing.
so it doesn't
anyways.
matter if they're owner occupied or not, since
And
it's
that
already a rental
part, that portion can
property.
definitely be up for debate, but, you know, I do also sympathize a
Okay.
little bit with some people that already have.
Okay, and you also
existing.
mentioned about a building type. Say if we do have duplex or even fourplex in small
okay.
apartments in R1A or R1B, you kind of mentioned you want to treat them a little bit differently since they're more in,
We have some in,
we can add the language. I know you have not proposed anything yet or mentioned any language over here, but we could propose some language like say, buildings that are duplex or more than one unit buildings allowed in the following district that we exempt we require owner occupancy can be exempt from this requirement.
so if it's already existing, right? I mean, obviously the goal is not to create a path for
Right.
people to split up more houses. But you're saying if you're currently,
Right. So for R1A and R1B, if you do want to create more units, you have to have you have to look at a zoning code. There is a requirement of the lot size, lot width, and lot depth, and the square footage of the units. You have to comply with the code to be able to split. So it's not saying you can easily convert a single family to a
Yeah.
duplex, just,
okay,
If
no,
you don't
I
have
see what you're
that
saying. And no, I
qualification.
could see that as a path. Because like I said, some of those, depending on unit type, make more sense probably than
Okay.
others. And I think that would more match, again, what I
So I guess
I think
my
is the desire of the community as well. And what I'll just add overall is I think it's easier
okay.
to go ahead and add restrictions now. Just in general, add restrictions now. It's always easier to loosen restrictions.
Right.
It's tougher to tighten them later because we kind of already have that problem now because units already exist. So that's the toughest part of this now is this already exists. So it's hard to tighten when something's already going on. But it's easier to loosen it. So
I
we
get
could
it.
always loosen regulations down the road as well.
So maybe we can have a proposed language such as the owner occupancy will be required. It shall be owner occupied for run SDR if you are, if the property is zoned R1A, R1B, or Northgate PUD, except, and then we'll have the exemptions listed down there, say, except you're a rental property that's registered with the city and comply with city code.
As of May
and-
1st, 2020.
As of, you want to add a date over there as well, which is, today is May 4th. But, I
That's why I
mean,
went in May 1st.
Yeah.
we could
I
discuss.
guess you're closed for the night, aren't you? May 4th. There we go. May 5th, whatever today is.
I have limited staff tomorrow, so as far as you don't put May 5th
Rush
there.
in the
It'll be
door.
5,000 people standing at the door tomorrow.
But yeah, we could have proposed some language like that, and we can find a condition list over there that are exempt from this requirement if we believe this is the best approach. And also, there is a language over there, keep in mind that this is a list of requirement for properties that's reviewed by staff and approved administratively. There is always another route, that is the applicant, this is within our proposed language, that the applicant can request for a conditional use permit that goes through planning commission, city council, if you don't meet these requirements. And so, in other words, there will be a second tier that if you don't meet these requirements, you still have a chance if you make your case, and it could be because you have a unique situation, and therefore, there is a process for it still. I just kind of want to put that out there so we don't forget about it. Is this a direction want to move forward?
Yeah, all that sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I mean,
Just to
Brian,
clarify, so I just want to make sure, so we're going to restrict owner occupant, so any STRs in residential zones have to be owner occupied unless they are already registered by a certain date. Now, what if we get 500 registrations next
Yeah,
week?
like in the past, not
Okay,
going
so
forward.
it'd
Like
be-
they already
okay.
have to have done.
Excellent.
Is that legal? Can we
Okay.
even do that? Can we set a date that's today or in the past?
Um,
I know, I'm asking you a legal question there.
that, I'm not your legal counsel. That's above my pay grade. That I will have to consult with our legal counsel. If we were to set a date, is that okay? But
Because-
my past experience is yes.
Okay.
Kansas
Because-
City has done something similar before. Say when they first established a short-term rental, they gave people a certain amount of time, say they have to register, otherwise you pass this date, you're treated as, if you're a non-conforming situation, you have to register before a certain date. If you pass this date, then you're treated as you lose your legal non-conforming
Yeah, that
status,
makes- okay.
basically. So when you are proposing a date that's before our discussion today, that's a little bit different. So I need to ask
sense.
my.
I mean, the goal is
our
not to
legal
create the
counsel's-
Right.
rush and really change what's happening now. I mean, the goal is kind of keep what's.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was the point of the commentary, is to kind of keep what exists, I guess.
Right.
Is what I think I'm saying.
I think I understand your goal here.
Yeah.
Is we want to cap the rental property at where it is now. We don't want to encourage more
Maintain
rental
that, yeah.
property for short-term rental down the road. If that is the goal, I'm sure there's a way we can reach it.
Yeah.
Let me get that opinion from our legal counsel before I put it in the language over here and being
call him.
challenged later.
Put up on speaker.
So, all that makes sense. What did we say about R2, 3, 4? Is that going to be non-owner occupant, okayed? But
That sounds like this is what
that-
the direction I'm getting.
I mean,
If
I
you're-
just said that. I don't know if I heard any other opinions on that one. So
I mean, that makes.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I know
sense
Kansas
to me.
City did
They're
like a
already
complete R
rentals.
restriction with some exceptions based on ownership and whatnot. But I mean,
Those
I would
zones,
continue to push with the
I mean,
higher density.
from my experience, those zones do turn over quite a bit more than the R1 A and B. So there's that natural flow of, signs go up in the yards constantly. So it makes more sense to me that way, having those not require the owner occupancy, but layering on do we want to go with the language about ownership within 50 miles as well? What do we think about that?
I would say yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just, may clarify that, so and with the language that you read from Kansas City, Missouri's code that, I mean, their high-powered lawyers have vetted how to find the natural person behind the legal entity. That seems like the right language to slide in.
Yeah, because they do if registry is not the owner of the dwelling unit, identification of each owner of the dwelling unit by full name, telephone number, social security number, federal tax identification number, mailing address, email address, and date of birth. If the dwelling unit is owned by a corporation, limited liability, partnership, limited partnership, trust, or real estate investment trust, the name and address of any of the following shall be
That's-
provided. And that's what the list I read earlier.
And that's
So-
all on our registration form, but to require it
Mm-hmm.
be the actual person who owns it is like a step in the right direction. That's beyond
Yeah.
what we've done in the past,
And-
so I like that.
They do go further on proof of residential short-term rentals as well, including two forms of, I'm skipping some things that are probably relevant here, but I'll
So
go to
that
the
they
forms.
actually reside there.
Yeah, they ask for at least two forms of the following documents demonstrating that such parcels are primary residence.
Yeah.
And the options are proof of valid motor vehicle registration, federal or state tax returns or other financial documents, proof of voter registration, a utility bill, and/or any other legal documentation deemed sufficient by the director that is pertinent to establishing primary residence.
Yeah.
So, I
We
mean,
can use similar language as well when we require owner occupancy proof, ownership proof.
Okay.
and I guess one of their questions that though would have to probably come up would be some sort of penalty if someone claims to be a resident and is not. a
Getting
resident.
back to what Byron was talking about earlier, like penalties in the form of fees. Like going through codes is a thing. I mean, that's how we handle most of our stuff now. But it does seem like there should be the immediacy of a fee levied if you're doing something that's super out of bounds.
So typically, when you have a fine over there, we typically in the language we will say we can fine you up to a certain amount. But typically, before you can issue the fine, you normally have to investigate the case anyway to have the evidence being taken by staff,
Yeah.
and before we can fine you.
Does it go to a judge too if there's an appeal? Is that how
If
that
we want to
process-
just put it in the language and make community development to be able to write the fine and let us just process it, we can do that. Or if you wanted to just bring it down to code compliance component, just like what we run the other ones, you have to bring it to the judge to fine, we can do that as well.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I think it would be, and not to oversimplify the job of enforcement, but we're basically get on Airbnb, look up, you have a property listed, you're not licensed.
Right.
That would be that would be our use case for the majority. It's just
Screenshot
somebody
proof.
running one
Yeah.
that doesn't have a permit to do so.
And
That's probably going to be
I could
easy.
read Kansas City's real quick too, because they got two sections related to violations and penalties. The first one that reads any person or entity who fails to comply or causes or permits any condition that fails to comply with the requirements of this article shall be guilty of an ordinance violation, and upon conviction thereof shall be punishable as set forth in section 56.810. Each day during which any unlawful act as defined in section 56.807 occurs or continues shall constitute a separate violation. In 56.810 is the penalties. That says any person or entity convicted of violation of this article shall be punished for that violation by a fine of not less than $200, but not more than 1,000, which would actually conflict with our ordinance because we have a max, I believe, of 500 in our ordinances.
That's right.
200 per day per separate.
Two
My
per day.
Goodness, that's strong.
Or by imprisonment of not more than 180 days, or by such fine and imprisonment, which is also in our code.
I mean,
but we have a
to-
top level of
To
500.
be fair, if someone can make $200 or $300
Sure.
a day, and you're slapping them with a $50 fine, they might just pay the fine and go right ahead and make their money. So it has. I think
Like
it has
parking in a cheap parking.
I mean, it is a very
Yeah.
strong de-incentive, I think, too.
To break the rules. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It
would be
is.
in favor of putting that under the jurisdiction of you all to write those fines instead of
Yeah.
having it go through a whole code compliance and judges and all of that. In fact, Kansas City today also moved the oversight of this into their neighborhoods group so that they could be more efficient with how they process that.
Okay. I will put that in the code, the language that similar to what Mayor just read. And if my understanding is correctly, do you guys want to pursue the number that Kansas City has? That no less than $200, no more than
Up to
$500?
Not less than 200.
Do it.
I mean, 5 is the max. I think
500
we
is
can set a
max.
minimum by saying exactly like they did, not less than.
Do we want to set a
200.
minimum of 200 then?
I would say yes.
I think
Yes.
so.
I mean, there will be a little bit more harsh, consequence if we find people are in violation over there. Like we can suspend and revoke any of the license.
Yeah, I think that's another discussion that we want to have, is we need to have some real clear pathways for revoking the licenses and allowing people to make complaints if it's necessary. I mean, whether we review police calls or whether there's some sort of more formalized process that somebody can file a complaint, but we do need to make sure that that's included.
We will take it as just a general code compliance cases. When we receive a written or an oral formal compliant, and then we will have our staff, I'll have my staff investigate it. That's when a case is open. And so through the investigation, we don't share all the details with public, but through the investigation, we'll gather evidence and we'll make a determination. And when we make a determination, if we find there is violation, yes, we can suspend or revoke the license, depends on the severity of it.
And I think we'd want to do that for a period of time. I would think that we wouldn't want to just revoke it for 3 months. I think we'd want it to be a fairly harsh penalty, like a year or 2 years or something.
Just on the portion of you issuing the fines. So how could one appeal that then? I mean, that would be my one concern, obviously.
Yeah.
We don't want any system that just ends with, like,
Gotcha.
you did this. Yeah, I mean, which is why we have the court system and the setup that we normally run these through.
Well, doesn't it say in Kansas City's if convicted? Like, doesn't that
Yeah,
imply
yeah.
that you have been tried and convicted?
Yeah, that's what I was curious if we just hand that over, what that would look like.
So for any, typically for staff, there are 2 different sets. But for any zoning code related staff determination, when we're addressing the appeals, they typically go to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. When we're addressing building
That's what they
code,
do. I got to make sure I got people appointed to that.
when we addressing building code violation, typically that goes to city council because city council is the dedicated body for building code appeal hearing committee.
It is.
So we do have the appealing process, and then likely usually
Okay.
after the appeal process, a determination is made by the board, and if they still want to continue to appeal it, they can go to
Okay.
the court.
No, I think that sufficiently answers it. Yeah, what I was asking there, because yeah, you always want people to have every opportunity to exhaust their options there. Okay, thank you.
We could do like Byron suggested, I mean, and reduce it to writing that, our investigation will consist of a simple internet search of Airbnb, Vrbo, and any other related short-term rental site. If, that would be, for example, that would be one part of the,
They actually have an interesting,
that may be more of a
Yeah,
policy.
kind of.
not in this, but.
kind
you
of
know what I'm saying?
flipping that equation. Kansas City has unlawful transactions today, to reference them again, which actually goes after the booking service provider. It says it shall be a violation of this article for any booking service provider to receive payment directly or indirectly for a short-term rental located in the city that is not registered
That
pursuant
was-
to this article.
Yeah, that's where I was.
And so
gonna-
kind of the inverse there, of that, because that penalty would be on at least that specific part of the code.
I would think that's very hard for us to enforce, to ask for a third party to cut us a check
Right.
or
Hey,
fine them.
Well, maybe we run it through the courts then.
But
Let's
we
show up eventually with
actually-
that one.
We do use, we
wants
would use the third-party platform to serve as an evidence when we conduct an investigation. Say if there is a property doesn't have a proper registration, and we got complaint, it's running as SDR, and our staff likely will go do some research, and if we found this property is clearly, advertising over there on the platform, and that's one thing, it's a little tricky nowadays, that they don't really show the exact address
Well,
of
one-
the property. But
one-
people
One
have
more
evidence.
section of Kansas City Code, which then hopefully then I'm done referring to this one. Each booking service provider shall maintain and provide the city upon request the following information for short-term rental transactions facilitated in the city within the past 5 years. So again, putting it on them to,
We could,
if you want to offer this service in the community, then you need to maintain this list and provide it to us upon request.
right,
Which
we
includes the
could
name of the person who
try.
offered it, the address of the short-term rental, the dates it was booked, the price paid. I mean, 2 of those I don't really care about, but
The other thing.
And then the
I-
registration number as well.
Similar to that of what we could ask of the third parties. I mean, let's say someone didn't know, and started an Airbnb, they were behind the game, they just weren't paying attention, didn't see the flyer, or I don't know how we're going to get the word out about this, and they set one up. Is it possible that we could work with the third parties to let them know that we have this in place, and they prompt, if, by the way, there is a fine of X per day if you're not registered with the city, before they even create one?
Yeah.
To prevent accidental, I would hate for somebody to get $1,000 fine just because they didn't know, and they didn't have any kind of warning or anything from the third parties that this requires permits.
So for code violation cases, and this is why a code violation investigation sometimes takes a little bit longer, there is a due process. We generally will send out our first notification to the property owner and require a response usually within 15 to 30 days to correct the action. So we don't just go ahead and fine, here's the ticket, here you go, you pay us $1,000. That's usually not the process that we run, and the reason for that is exactly like, Commissioner Byrne, that you just mentioned, that somebody might just not know about this. And of course, when this particular ordinance is ready to move forward, I would request a delay of the effective date, so staff has enough time to develop the registration forms, and internally, we know what is the procedure for us to handle it. At the same time, we need to educate the community, educate the business. So we'll push it out as much as we could. But typically, we don't, especially in the first year when we enforce the code, we normally don't just go ahead and fine people. I do believe there was a little question before raised by commissioners that asking about if there is any potential to impose a higher tax rate on short-term rental. So the answer is generally no. We have pretty much maximum 5%. This is what we can charge. That is written in the state statute. So there's not much we can do from our end.
Can we do a CID or a neighborhood district? And
Easy.
That could be discussed. And,
for
within,
$200,000 in lawyer fees, we can collect
Yeah.
$5,000. It's great.
Okay, the two things quick that should be easy. So the bullets you pitched earlier about the prepared food, is everybody good with that? Like that change?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, and then adding C under the first piece that talks about what can be like the entire property under section 1. There's like A and B, and then C would be the entire property. To clarify, because under these two, it doesn't sound like you could.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm good
okay
with
with that.
Okay. And then the other question was something that, Lindsay, you mentioned, revoking licenses for disruptive, which makes a lot of sense. What I wonder about is how much responsibility the owner bears for disruptive guests. And I'll put a personal piece on that. Is I have long-term renters who have been an absolute nuisance to their neighbors. And it's not because I didn't screen the absolute heck out of them. I just rejected a number of applications for that property. But if I was being held responsible for their actions toward the neighbors, like, it would be shut down yesterday. And it's tough because your hands are tied as a property owner, like what you can actually do. You can't legally go in there and tell them to knock it off. You can't take the door off to make them move out. There's just only so many things you can do. And if you're screening, like you're looking at reviews of them as a guest prior, they could all be 5 stars because people are being nice. It's really tough to bear out who is responsible for an unruly guest.
Well, I think that, and I appreciate that. I understand that it's not your fault
Sure.
if your tenants aren't being great. However, if you're operating an Airbnb and the same place is getting called, 3, 4, 5 times in a year, I think that means there's some issue with either the listing or the review process or something.
Yeah.
I don't think a first offense warrants revoking a license. I don't think a second offense warrants revoking a license, but I think a demonstrated pattern of neighborhood disturbance would require that, and however we define that.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I'll add to that. So, like, I stayed in an Airbnb in Louisville, and the owner listed all the fines you could get for not doing what you were supposed to do. Disrupting, the neighbors. If they got a complaint from a neighbor, you'd be fined $150. If you didn't take out the trash the last day you were there, you're going to be fined $150. I think, so based on all that, I assumed
They made
they
all
would
that
be
up.
fined
Yeah, they can't do that.
somehow. No, they had a schedule of fees. Like
Oh, yeah.
If you were disruptive.
You can write
you
it.
would be-
You could write it all in
They
there.
will, no, they were going to add it automatically. It would be automatically added through the checkout process. So they didn't clear you your bill until they went and inspected the
Interesting.
house, so.
As far as I understand, that's forbidden from most platforms, like layering on fees after the fact, because then it gets into them
I don't
being
know if
the
it's spelled
adjudicator.
out. I mean,
Sure.
it's not a hidden fee. It was not hidden. And maybe it was just to, like keep people out that were planning to have parties or were,
Sure.
want to just dine and dash.
Well,
so
if
to
nothing
speak.
else, it makes you a more responsible guest,
Yeah.
right? Like you are less
you don't want
likely,
that, right?
even if it's not possible to actually recoup that, you're probably less likely to be a bad neighbor.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what Airbnb can and can't do in terms of like, what can they do in Louisville that's different than here? What does that city want that you maybe aren't asking for, so. That would be my take on it, but. I guess I would say this, so, like, there was an Airbnb next to us for a while. And, a couple times there were some noisy guests, and, the guy that actually lived there apologized later, but,
Yeah, it's
I mean, some of it's on, you can't, you're the owner, like, you're responsible. It's on you, really. I mean, yours is a little different. I mean, like, you rented.
yeah,
It's a
I mean, it's-
long-term rental, I think,
Yeah.
is a different situation, right?
It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, just finding the right threshold. I totally agree that disruptive should be shut down at some point. It's just how do we define the disruptive? Do we use noise complaints, police reports? Because in some cases, you could just have that neighbor that complains about everything, filing a report every time a guest stays because they don't like it. Does that hold up to being disruptive? It's like finding the right way to police it is going to be a tricky thing, but I think it's definitely a good point to raise.
This is the job of my code compliance manager. And we do receive a lot of complaints. Not every complaint is legit. So we have complaint cases that we close the case and say no violation was found. And again, you can appeal that to the body if you have evidence. That's why when we open a case and establish investigation, we gather evidence. So I do want to kind of mention this, and I do think we could possibly amend this language that it's under 11. If you are looking at it, the language currently says the city remains its rights to deny, suspend, or revoke the license when the rental fails to meet or uphold any of the above standards or any other provisions of the North Kansas City Municipal Code. We can amend it as if a license is revoked, the same property shall not be considered for short-term rental for the next 2 years or something like that, if you guys want to go one step further to put that punishment over there. But this is also a process kind of mentioned to you, like we can deny, we can suspend, and revoke. So likely if we are investigating it, and to a certain point, we can suspend it to clarify what the problem really is. Is this owner's responsibility? Is this his renter's responsibility? And how do we solve this problem? If we figure it out or there's a solution for it, likely we're just suspending the license for a little bit, for a period of time. If we cannot figure it out and, it becomes a pattern of these violations, then we'll lead to revoking of the license.
I would be in favor of that.
The only caveat I would put on that is rather than tying it to the property for X number of years or months, I would tie it to the owner.
Yeah.
Because if they sell it or move,
Then that kind of wipes it
yeah,
out.
it wipes it
Start
clean.
zero.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a different person
Got it.
operating it.
So does everybody agree with that, adding that component, like 2 years? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
And I would assume if, we haven't, I don't think we've touched on this, if someone can apply to have multiple, like the same person applying for multiple licenses.
Are you-
Have we talked about this?
Within one lot, or are you referring to as
No, like,
citywide?
like citywide, say you own 3 houses and you're
Oh, so yeah.
gonna, like, let's just as an example. Would that, if they had multiple, would one license cover multiple
No.
addresses? Would it be one license per address? And then if we were to revoke it, suspend it, whatever, would that be all of them?
Nope.
Just that
So-
one?
This goes, the registration goes with the property, and we're talking about dwelling unit.
Okay,
So-
perfect.
If that makes sense, there is a particular language over here about, that's number 7. It says only one short-term rental contract is permitted at a time per one approved short-term rental application. No more than one short-term rental registration may be permitted per dwelling unit, regardless of building types. So to answer your question, one property owner, the same name, can have multiple properties scattered around, and it doesn't matter. They can have multiple, more than one short-term rental. The short-term rental goes with the dwelling unit, how many dwelling unit you have, and you cannot have more than one per dwelling unit.
And then if one of those properties was subjected to having their business license revoked, it would be the property, that property.
It's
and
that
that owner
property.
could still operate other ones unless there was an issue.
That's correct.
Okay. I think that's fair.
Okay, I think that was just a clarification, right? We don't need to amend anything. All right. I think I made enough notes over here. I get a lot of good feedback. Looks like we will have to do some big surgery to
I thought we were
this.
gonna make a motion on all those amendments. No, I'm kidding.
No, please. If you can word all of them out, I got this recorded. I can take that later.
We motion you watch the video and.
But I would recommend you give staff some time and let us kind of reorganize everything, redraft some stuff, and we'll bring the revised proposal back here, because sounds like that's a bigger change to our current proposal language over here. And again, please keep in mind, there will be an inspection process through the registration. And this is what I want to put it out here for your guys' benefit of understanding it. So our current building code we enforce is 2008 International Building Code. Likely, we will consider short-term rental for lodging, short-term rental, which is a different category. It is being described in 2021's building code. So when we go inspection, I'll just put it a little easier way for everybody to understand it. So lodging facility, often they're commercial properties, like hotel, motel. They have a whole different category of requirements per building code requirement and fire code for egress and for safety travels and, fire suppression, things like that. And residential properties, typically, they're not subject to that very strict requirements. So likely for short-term rental, it will be somewhere in between. It might be a little bit more than just regular short residential property. It's because you're hosting likely out of town or people who are not very familiar with this area. We want to make sure they clearly have the guidance of how to safely get out of the property if any bad things happening. But also at the same time, because most of these short-term rental properties, they're probably not going to be classified as a commercial property per our building code. So there is not big reason to enforce like a lodging facilities code over to it. So that's going to be overkill. And normally, there will be a little extra amount of investment will be required for upgrading your existing property to be able to host as short-term rental. Staff has been in discussion with fire department, so we will probably get into some more detail of the technical matter. I just want to put it out there so everybody knows what it will come in the future. Yes.
That sounds good. Would that checklist be made public so that somebody could prepare their place?
We plan on getting that checklist pushed out once when we get this ordinance ready.
Okay.
There is a language in the ordinance generally saying that the director of the community development is authorized to create the registration form. So in the registration form, there will be a checklist attached to it.
Okay.
So people will have the information what they need to do, whether or not they want to invest to upgrade their property to be able to host a short-term rental.
Right.
At that point. All right, I want to remind you that there's still public comment time.
All right, are there any more comments from anybody on the? All right. I now open the public hearing on PC 2023-05-01. If anyone wishes to speak, please approach the microphone. All right, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close the
Second.
public hearing.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
None opposed? All right, do we need to make a motion on this, or are you guys?
Yes, you do need to make a motion to, if you wish to continue this discussion or continue this code amendment of this item to a certain date.
Move to continue this to June,
Let me find
our
it.
next planning commission meeting in June. Is it the first? I can't remember.
June 1st.
Is it,
It's
okay,
also
June 1st?
a holiday week, so I know I'll be out.
I'll be out.
I will too, so maybe we continue it to
Yikes.
July.
No,
Or
July,
Can we
or-
move the meeting?
June.
should we go to move the meeting to June 8th instead of June 1st?
I don't know
We
what the
have a
ordinance
meeting?
is. Now I got a whole thing. Hold on.
Do we need to move to do that first and then move to continue until that meeting?
I have half a motion here. Let's see.
Also, does the 8th work for people?
Just 7 members comprised of 5 members, mayor, 1.
Better than the first.
Yeah, first is not going to happen. I don't even think we have a quorum for that.
Planning Commission shall hold regular meetings and special meetings as they provide by rule. So there we go, whenever we want. It sounds.
You could have a special meeting, which happened before.
Yeah,
I typically don't recommend a special meeting, especially on a hot topic that you have public comments and you know there might be public testimony.
let me ask this though, we've already exhausted the public testimony on this by opening and closing it now, right? We're not obligated to have an additional
That I
public
cannot
testimony.
answer.
We'll have new stuff, right, to bring forward.
But it's
No,
the same-
maybe not.
But it's the same item.
Yeah, it's the same stuff, just seeing how it is in writing.
I mean, that's like what we did on the Chapter 100 bonds
True.
for 23rd and Swift as well. We held
But
the
it-
public comments the first meeting, but they weren't quite ready.
Yeah, giving the
never held a
July
meeting.
meeting is probably also not a great time. You can consider a special meeting because
Yeah,
the July meeting is July 6th. It's
Ugh,
2 days
right.
after 4th of July.
Everybody will still be,
what's the holiday on June?
yeah, I mean, do we want to just make cancel the July one, if there's nothing on the agenda, and then make a special meeting for the 8th?
Of June.
June 8th, yeah.
So I motion,
EIC meets at night, according to my calendar. I'm not
we
sure
have-
if it's,
we have to have a motion.
but it could be a different day. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Thursday.
True.
I'm busy the 7th. And the 6th is council.
I know the 8th, there's a Parks Board meeting. Could we do it on the 15th of June?
We probably do have something for June. We probably have another plat for June that we're
Oh.
reviewing.
It
Well, who's not going to
sounds
be here? I heard several say they aren't going to be here.
Three,
or at least two or
including
three.
the chair,
Oh, for June 8th?
for June
June
1st.
1st.
The
Oh.
actual June meeting.
No, I will be here June 1st.
Oh.
I won't.
I won't.
Will?
Yes.
Okay. Good, guys.
I
So,
can be present.
One thing I want to clarify is, this
When
is a
did June
continued
1st?
item, so we have established a quorum.
Then I guess.
Yeah, so
There's gonna be enough
I
people
want to
here.
make sure we have enough quorum to hear this case and everybody feel
John,
comfortable
what are you doing on
to
June 1st?
pass this. If I remember correctly.
It's already on my calendar, so I've saved the date.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, that we have pushed our meeting before to a different Thursday. So it's not like we don't have a predecessor. If you all are okay with June 8th, we can.
I would rather do June 15th if that's,
If-
Oh, yeah.
First, June 1st?
either
About this
June
June
1st or June 15th.
I mean, if we have the
15th.
quorum.
I mean, why not have the 15th where everybody's here? Seemingly. Are you here on the 15th?
That's kind of far
Yeah,
out.
I can do the 15th.
Yeah, I don't care. Either way.
Because there's other stuff,
I'm not gonna lose
other
any sleep
business
over
as
this.
well.
Yeah, we'll need a motion.
Is there a motion to?
Oh, I did half that motion. I'll finish the motion.
Yeah, you
I
have-
move to continue this case until our special planning commission meeting on June 15th. That we're just now telling everybody we're having.
Second.
There.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All right, none opposed. Excellent. And then, do we need to make any other motions related to this? No. Okay, excellent. Are there any comments from staff?
I have no comments. You guys did a wonderful job today.
Are there any comments from commissioners?
Go team. This was a good one.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thank you to Lindsay and Bryant for particularly going through the Kansas City code and making this discussion flow a lot more smoothly because you had actual stuff that was actionable. So thank you for
That
that.
helps.
Excellent. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Thanks, everybody.
There you go. Damn. I got my no out. I want to hang out all night. No. It all just goes in my folder here. Lots of things. There we go. You got your.